Mystery of the Titanic. How the world's greatest ship disappeared. Welcome to a brand new episode of yet another greatest mystery in the world. Guess what we're exploring today? Yes, it's none other than the mystery of the Titanic. Now, wait a minute. I know what you're thinking. Same old story. But what if there's more to it? What if there are more mysteries at the bottom of the sea than you know of? And today, we will discover them together. Picture this, a ship so grand, it was practically Beyoncé of the sea. How on earth did the world's greatest ship decide to vanish without a trace? If you enjoy a good historical adventure, a tale brimming with mysteries, then this video is for you. Trust me, by the time we're done here, you'll be the Titanic expert at your next dinner party. So grab your lifeboats to sail with us to the end of this mysterious journey. Welcome, knowledge seekers, to the Universal Facts channel. Here we unveil fascinating and lesser-known facts from around the world every day. Stay tuned for your daily dose of intriguing knowledge. On April 14, 1912, at 11:40 p.m., RMS Titanic met its horrible fate. A terrible iceberg led to its ultimate end only 3 hours later. Finally, by 2:20 a.m., the early morning of April 15th, the biggest ship of the time disappeared under the ice-cold water of the Atlantic Ocean. Unfortunately, it didn't go down alone, but took 1,500 lives with it. That's more than 2/3 of all the people on board. That much we kind of already know, thanks to James Cameron. The Titanic was called the unsinkable ship. The kind of safety features used to make this ship practically termed it indestructible. It was a ship that could never sink. White Star Line was the legendary company that built this unsinkable ship. Its vice president, Philip A. Franklin, was so confident that he claimed in a public speech that Titanic was in fact unsinkable. If you think about it, the ship's architecture was really remarkable. I mean, who needs a 5-star hotel when you have a Titanic buffet, right? It was no less than 882 feet 9 inches long, 92 feet wide, and 175 feet tall. Not only this, but it also had a usable volume of 46,328 tons. Wow, it does look indestructible, but spoiler alert, it's not. Titanic was really an artwork in every way. It also had 4 massive smokestacks, each weighing 60 tons. They stood tall at 81.5 feet above the deck. Safe to say, its construction cost was no less than $7.5 million. But hey, it's surprisingly still less than the production cost of the movie Titanic. I guess Jack didn't die for nothing after all. The ship had everything you want in a 5-star hotel today. Stained glass mirrors, ornate wood panels, 2 grand staircases, a heated swimming pool, Turkish baths, electric baths, a massive gym, a squash court, 4 grand restaurants, 2 barbershops, and even a library. Everything you'd dream of was there. No wonder why people were crazy to hop into this one. It's really hard to fathom that such a complicated mechanism with grand safety and all the work, money, and effort would sink just like that. So what really happened? Well, Mother Nature, being the ultimate party pooper, had other plans. The Atlantic was like, "Hey Titanic, welcome to my hood," and threw a gnarly iceberg its way. Those sneaky chunks of frozen water were chilling in the Titanic's path. Literally just after 2 days of her first voyage, on April 12, 1912, Titanic got her first ice warning. There were mountains of icebergs scattered around the Atlantic Ocean along her way. Safe to say, the Titanic did change her course twice to avoid any danger after these warnings. However, it didn't reduce its speed. It continued its journey at a speed of 21.5 knots, around 40 kilometers an hour. I mean, slow down, girl! Now, 2 days later, on the 14th of April 1912, they received 7 more ice warnings. But unfortunately, Captain Smith and his crew ignored the warning. Red flag! Another shocking thing about the night of the 14th of April was the fact that there was no moon in sight. Since there was no moonlight, the visibility was practically zero. Now, here's the moment you've all been waiting for, the Big Bang. No, not the theory. We're talking about the Titanic colliding with the iceberg. At 11:39 p.m., a man called Frederick Fleet sees a huge iceberg in front of him from the crow's nest of the ship. I can imagine the iceberg thinking, "Am I a joke to you?" as the Titanic approached. But hey, who am I to judge? The iceberg was the rock star that night, stealing the spotlight like a surprise guest at a Taylor Swift concert. Immediately after the collision, the panic arises. First Officer Williams signals the engine room to turn the ship in the right direction. However, unfortunately, it was too late by then. A minute after, at 11:40 p.m., the ship crashes with the iceberg. Even the iceberg wasn't a small one. It was gigantic, anywhere from 200 to 400 feet in length, and a height almost as tall as the crow's nest of the ship. In fact, some scientists believe that it weighed around 1.5 million tons. Now, here's the important part. The iceberg crashed into the Titanic on the right side, particularly at the bow area. The bow is the front part of the ship that slid against the iceberg for almost around 10 seconds. Ultimately, it ended up with a huge dent and many small holes in the Titanic's body. Unfortunately, since the iceberg was massive, the impact itself was harsh. Now, wasn't the ship unsinkable? I mean, remember the unbelievable safety features. It had a double bottom hull. The hull is basically the body of the ship, and since it was double layered, even if one was damaged, the ship wouldn't sink. Also, the ship body was divided into 16 separate watertight compartments. Even if 4 compartments were filled with water, the Titanic would still sail. So, how did it sink? Well, for starters, the impact of the iceberg was on the side of the ship, so the double bottom hull was practically useless here. Secondly, the impact was so massive that it instantly filled 6 out of the 16 watertight compartments. This was more than the original anticipated 4. So, the bad news? The unsinkable ship was about to sink. 20 minutes after the collision, Captain Smith finally calls out a distress call over the radio, but with no response. Luckily, 20 minutes later, at 12:20 a.m., another ship, RMS Carpathia, receives the signals. However, the voyage back to the Titanic would still take around 3.5 hours, even at its maximum speed. So just for once, imagine yourself in the chaos, the ship slowly filling with water, people rushing here and there panicking, trying to get into one of the lifeboats so they could safely evacuate. But sadly, even the lifeboats were limited. There were only 20 lifeboats to save around 1,200 people out of the 2,200 people. Around 1 a.m., the front bow of the Titanic started to sink due to all the water in the front compartments. As the bow went underwater, the backside and the propellers surfaced out of the water. According to eyewitnesses and the people on the lifeboats, the Titanic broke into 2 halves around 2:30 a.m. and slowly began to sink. Sadly, it didn't even take 3 full hours for this unsinkable ship to sink. All those 1,500 people on the ship either drowned in the water or died of hypothermia. Indeed, it was a tragedy. I mean, who could survive in -2 degrees Celsius? Except for maybe Rose, no pun intended. Now, here's the real kicker, the mystery that keeps historians scratching their heads like a confused cat. Where exactly is the Titanic's final resting place, and how did it disappear so thoroughly? You would think finding a huge ship at the bottom of the ocean would be like playing hide-and-seek with a hippo in your living room. Pretty hard to miss. But the ocean, being the vast, mysterious abyss it is, swallowed the Titanic whole, leaving us with more questions than answers. It took more than 70 years to find the wreckage underneath the water. It was only in September 1985 that an American ocean explorer, Robert Ballard, and a French oceanographer found the Titanic wreckage 3,800 meters underwater. The 2 sections were found 600 meters apart from each other. Slowly, the environment had started to erode the ship. It was reported that bacteria and other organisms are slowly eating its metal framework. It's expected that by 2030, the ship will completely disintegrate. And just like that, our Titanic tale reaches its abrupt end. But don't worry, we're just scratching the surface. If you're hungry for more historical mysteries, watch more of our videos and let me know in the comments what you think of the Titanic mystery. Until next time, hoist those sails high, mateys!